we created dialog. This is fairly straightforward code. We just have to make sure we store a reference to every dialog item that we want to do something with later. So I have references here. I don't actually do anything with images on this one. You could fade them. You can also make images on the buttons and so on. The same principle goes if you want multiple buttons per row. You just have to do some more calculations with your scroll speed and your updating and so on. You could, for instance, loop. You could have multiple variables here, for instance, when you're creating the buttons, like columns and rows, and then you put one loop inside the other. So you loop through the columns inside the rows or something, and just create the button down like that. And then you can also use a single array, like I did here, a single dimensioned array, and just calculate the button numbers. So you add the column to the row and multiply and stuff like that. Or you can use a two-dimensional array where you have column and row that you store it in, so it's like X and Y, whatever you prefer. Anyway, not much to say about initialize. Show, we created this so that we can set a dialog type and reset some of the important variables to show our dialog. And it will just call the update list, which does all the work. Hide simply hides the dialog. Internally, we are storing quite a lot of stuff here. If you don't remember, we need these three here as general player information, which dialog is active, where they are in the list, and what item they've selected. Down here, we have the max amount of dialog items. The reason I did this was because I decided to put list data into the dialog. Optionally, instead of doing this solution where you fill the list for the dialog like I did, add list item and clear the list, you could have inside the update list here, you could have used the active dialog type to figure out which dialog type is active, and then based on that you could pull the text string directly out of your unit or hero library depending on which dialog is active. What is better for you, you'll have to figure out yourself. The other one reduces the amount of double storage you have in memory, so perhaps it's better for some big maps. This one I think is more logical, and it keeps things more separate. You only have a single function, the callback handler, which actually hooks into the unit or hero library. Here you could also just have it call another function outside. Anyway, let's get back to the explanation. And the rest here are just dialog settings. You can tweak the dialog. I can change the height of the buttons simply by changing this. So if I want wider buttons. The width, I did not hook the dialog width into the width here. I could have done it, calculated that as well. But here you see, we have wider buttons. Yeah, you could have plugged that in as well. So if you're going to change the width here, you have to go into the initialize and tweak the width here as well. Anyway, moving on. Create dialog button, just to make our life a bit easier. So we don't have to copy up these settings all the time. All we need to pass in is the offset that we want the button to be at, and it will return the button for us. Very useful if you have to do one action many times in a row. The add list item and clear list items you should understand by now. It's the same principle as the unit library. I'm not going to go through them. The scroll up and down are fairly simple as well. We just check if the current list position is larger than 1 when we want to go up. And for scroll down, we check if it's lower than the maximum items we have in our list. Of course, we have to calculate this based on the list position and the total amount of buttons we have. So yeah, update list is the one that does all the work. The first loop here updates all the list items. It loops through our buttons. And then we take the current position plus 1. We had to subtract 1 already from it up here because both of them start on 1. If they both started on 0, for instance, you wouldn't need to do this adding and subtracting because 0 plus 0 equals 0. Sadly, 1 plus 1 equals 2, which means that if you're at the start of the list at 1, and for the first button 1, it would add up to 2, which, yeah, is a problem. So I had to subtract 1 up here. If it, on the other hand, was 0, then it would be fine, as I said. Yeah, we go through the buttons. We calculate which position it is at in the list. And then we just show the information on the button, and we disable and enable it based on if it's selected. And then we just update the scroll buttons, and it's fairly straightforward. The callback as well, I think it was fairly straightforward. If a button is hit, we select the item that is on that button. Also a bit of math here, fairly simple. It might look a bit complicated, but if you take your time and just read through it, maybe write it down in Notepad or something, you'll get it. We call the update after we do something, else it will not be reflected. Same with the scroll buttons, just adjusting our list position and calling update, and this of course calling the button handler. So yeah, that concludes this part of this massive tutorial. I'm afraid to hit stop on my recording now because I have no idea how long it will be. I'm going to do one more part, and in that part I'm going to show you how to make a different kind of list. I'm going to, instead of using a dialog, I'm going to keep the same list, but at the same time as it's scrolling with the buttons, you're going to see it scrolling through units in the game world. So yeah, tune in to the next part for that.